In the shadowed halls of Ravencliff Manor, a chilling cry pierces the midnight silence. Sir Reginald Ashford is found dead, poisoned in a locked room, his secrets threatening to unravel a web of lies. Who among the elegant guests, his grieving widow, a secretive novelist, a brash financier, or a timid cousin, holds the key to his murder? Why did he plan a confession that never came? Join Hercule Poirot as he unravels a tapestry of betrayal, hidden identities, and deadly truths. Will the killer strike again before the little gray cells reveal all? Chapter 1. The Shadows of Ravencliff Manor. In the late autumn of 1928, the English countryside lay draped in a melancholy mist, the kind that clung to the hedgerows and whispered of secrets best left undisturbed. Ravencliff Manor, a sprawling Georgian estate nestled in the heart of Sussex, stood as a monument to both grandeur and decay. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys loomed over the village of Lower Dean, a silent sentinel of a bygone era. The manor's owner, Sir Reginald Ashford, was a man of considerable wealth and equally considerable mystery, known for his reclusive habits and the rare gatherings he hosted for a select few. Tonight, however, the manor was alive with the hum of anticipation, for Sir Reginald had invited a small but eclectic group to dine, a gathering that would, unbeknownst to its guests, set the stage for a tragedy. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend and chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, found himself among the invited. He had received a letter from Sir Reginald only a week prior, penned in an elegant hand, requesting his presence at Ravencliff for what was described as a matter of mutual interest. The vagueness of the invitation intrigued Hastings, who, though no longer in his youth, retained a boyish curiosity for the unusual. Poirot, it seemed, had not been invited, a fact that Hastings found mildly surprising, given his friend's reputation for unraveling the most perplexing of puzzles. Yet, as he stayed of restless vigilance, as though he expected betrayal at any moment, beside him stood his young wife, Lady Evelyn Ashford, a strikingly beautiful woman of no more than 30, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes darted nervously, betraying a fragility that contrasted with her poised demeanor. To her left was Dr. Henry Langston, a physician from London whose reputation for discretion had made him a favorite among the aristocracy. His round spectacles and mild-mannered speech suggested a man of quiet competence, but his fingers twitched as he sipped his sherry, a gesture Hastings found oddly telling. Across from him stood Miss Clara Winthrop, a novelist of some renown, whose sharp wit and sharper tongue had earned her both admirers and enemies. Her emerald-green dress caught the firelight, and her gaze was as piercing as her prose. Then there was Mr. Victor Crane, a brash young financier whose rapid rise in the city had sparked whispers of dubious dealings. His loud laugh and expansive gestures seemed out of place in the refined setting, yet he carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Beside him, Miss Beatrice Lyle, a distant cousin of Lady Evelyn, hovered like a shadow. Her plain features and dowdy attire rendered her almost invisible, but her eyes, large and watchful, missed nothing. Finally, there was Major Ernest Fowler, a retired military man with a weathered face and a penchant for recounting tales of his campaigns in India. His booming voice filled the room, but his stories seemed to serve as a shield, deflecting attention from some deeper unease. The seventh guest, a late addition, was Mr. Thomas Ridley, Sir Reginald's solicitor, a thin, nervous man whose briefcase seemed an extension of his person, clutched tightly even as he sipped his drink. Dinner was announced at precisely 8 o'clock, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under the weight of silver and crystal. The meal was exquisite. Roast pheasant, creamed potatoes, and a claret of exceptional vintage. But the conversation was stilted, punctuated by awkward silences. Sir Reginald spoke little. "Shall reveal all." A murmur rippled through the guests, some exchanging glances, others staring intently at their host. Hastings felt a chill, not from the words themselves, but from the weight behind them. Sir Reginald's eyes held a gleam of determination, but also something else. Fear, perhaps? Before anyone could press him further, he sat down abruptly, signaling the end of the speech. The evening drew to a close, and the guests retired to their rooms, each lost in their own thoughts. Hastings, restless, wandered the darkened corridors of Ravenscliffe, his mind replaying the evening's events. The manor was eerily quiet, save for the distant creak of floorboards and the howl of the wind outside. As he passed Sir Reginald's study, he noticed a sliver of light beneath the door. Curiosity piqued, he hesitated, then pressed his ear to the wood. A low murmur of voices reached him, Sir Reginald's, sharp and urgent, and another, softer, pleading. But before he could discern the words, the voices ceased and the light went out. Hastings returned to his room, his unease growing. He sat at the small writing desk, penning a quick note to Poirot, describing the peculiar atmosphere at Ravenscliffe and urging his friend to join him. "Something is amiss here, old chap," he wrote, "and I fear it is more than a mere social gathering." He sealed the letter, resolving to post it in the morning. As he lay in bed, the clock on the mantel struck midnight. Somewhere in the manor, a door slammed shut, and a faint cry echoed through the halls. Hastings sat up, heart pounding, but the sound was not repeated. He told himself it was the wind, or perhaps a servant's misstep. Yet sleep eluded him, and the shadows of Ravenscliffe seemed to close in around him, whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. Chapter 2. The Silent Scream. The dawn broke over Ravenscliffe Manor with a reluctant grayness, the mist thicker now, curling around the estate, gaze flitting nervously toward the door. Major Fowler recounted a tale of a sleepless night in Calcutta, his voice a touch too loud, as though to drown out some inner disquiet. Mr. Thomas Ridley, the solicitor, clutched his briefcase as though it were a lifeline, his thin lips pressed into a tight line. Sir Reginald, however, was conspicuously absent. The butler, a stooped man named Grayson, announced that the master had not yet risen, which was unusual, as Sir Reginald was known for his punctuality. A murmur of concern passed through the group, though none voiced it openly. Hastings, his instincts sharpened by years of association with Poirot, noted the tension in the room. Something was amiss, and the absence of their host only deepened his suspicion. At 9 o'clock, when Sir Reginald still had not appeared, Lady Evelyn rose, her hands trembling slightly. "I shall check on him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He may be unwell." Dr. Langston offered to accompany her, and the two departed, leaving the others in an uneasy silence. Hastings, unable to sit still, excused himself and followed at a discreet distance, his curiosity outweighing decorum. The upper corridors of Ravenscliffe were dim, the heavy drapes drawn against the morning light. Lady Evelyn and Dr. Langston paused outside Sir Reginald's bedroom, a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Lady Evelyn knocked softly, then more insistently, but there was no response. She turned to Dr. Langston, her face ashen. "He never locks his door," she murmured. "Something is wrong." Dr. Langston tried the handle, but it would not budge. He called for Grayson, who arrived with a ring of keys. The butler's hands shook as he unlocked the door, and as it swung open, a collective gasp escaped the trio. Sir Reginald Ashford lay sprawled across his four-poster bed, his face contorted in a rictus of agony, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A small glass vial lay on the floor beside him, its contents spilled, and a faint, bitter almond-like scent hung in the air. Unsettling. "No signs of a struggle," Langston muttered almost to himself. "He must have taken it willingly, or been deceived." Hastings, his mind racing, returned to the dining room to inform the others. The news was met with a mix of shock, disbelief, and in some cases poorly concealed satisfaction. Miss Winthrop's pen paused mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Mr. Crane's bluster faded, replaced by a wary silence. Miss Lyle's hands twisted in her lap, and Major Fowler's face hardened, as though recalling some grim battlefield memory. Mr. Ridley, clutching his briefcase even tighter, stammered something about legal matters but fell silent under the weight of the moment. The local constable, a stout man named Inspector Japp, arrived within the hour, accompanied by a young sergeant. Japp, who knew Hastings from previous cases, greeted him with a nod, but wasted no time in taking charge. He sealed off Sir Reginald's room and began questioning the guests, his manner brisk but thorough. Hastings, observing from the sidelines, noted that Japp's questions were straightforward, focusing on alibis and last sightings of the deceased. Most claimed to have been in their rooms at midnight, though Miss Winthrop admitted to wandering the library, and Major Fowler confessed to a late-night cigar on the terrace. As the morning wore on, Hastings slipped away to the village post office to dispatch his letter to Poirot, adding a postscript about the murder. He knew his friend would not resist such a puzzle, especially one so steeped in intrigue. Returning to the manor, he found the guests gathered in the drawing room, their conversations hushed, their glances furtive. Inspector Japp, emerging from Sir Reginald's study, announced that a preliminary search had revealed a will locked in a safe, naming Lady Evelyn as the primary beneficiary, with substantial bequests to Miss Lyle and Mr. Ridley. The revelation sent a ripple of tension through the room, and Hastings caught Miss Winthrop's sharp intake of breath, as though she had pieced together some private theory. The day passed in a blur of police activity, with servants questioned and rooms searched. Hastings the assembled guests, their faces masks of grief, fear, or calculation. He knew the road to truth would be fraught with deception. The game, as Poirot would say, was afoot. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot. The morning after Sir Reginald Ashford's death dawned with a bleakness that matched the mood at Ravencliff Manor. The mist had thickened, cloaking the estate in a veil that seemed to mirror the secrets held within its walls. Captain Hastings, restless after a fitful night, stood at the window of the drawing room, watching the gravel drive for the arrival of his friend, Hercule Poirot. The telegram had promised his presence, and Hastings knew that Poirot's punctuality was as reliable as the ticking of a Swiss clock. The other guests, scattered about the room, maintained a facade of civility, though their eyes betrayed suspicion and unease. The air was heavy with the weight of unspoken questions, and the presence of Inspector Japp's men, still combing the manor for clues, only heightened the tension. At precisely 10 o'clock, the crunch of tires on gravel announced the arrival of a sleek black taxi. The door opened, and out stepped Hercule Poirot, resplendent in a tailored overcoat, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the damp. His mustache, meticulously waxed, curled with an almost defiant elegance, and his sharp green eyes surveyed the manor with a calm, appraising gaze. Hastings hurried to greet him, relief washing over him at the sight of his friend's familiar figure. "Mon ami Hastings," Poirot exclaimed, his voice warm but precise. "You have summoned me to a most intriguing puzzle, n'est-ce pas? A death, a locked room, and a house full of secrets. C'est magnifique." Hastings, smiling despite the grim circumstances, led Poirot into the great hall, where Inspector Japp was waiting. Japp, who had crossed paths with Poirot on numerous occasions, greeted him with a mixture of respect and exasperation. "Well, Poirot, here you are, sticking your nose into another case. I suppose you'll tell me my men have missed something obvious." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not at all," murmured, bending to examine the vial without touching it. "Cyanide, you say, Inspector? A poison swift and merciless. And yet, the door was locked from the inside, the window open but too high for entry. Tell me, Hastings, what did you hear last night?" Hastings recounted the midnight cry and the muffled voices from Sir Reginald's study, his memory sharpened by Poirot's probing gaze. "I couldn't make out the words," he admitted, but there was urgency in Sir Reginald's tone, and the other voice, softer, perhaps a woman's, seemed distressed. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And this cry, it was brief? A scream or something else?" "A cry of alarm, I'd say," Hastings replied. "Not prolonged, but sharp, as though someone was startled or in pain." Poirot turned to Japp. "The autopsy, it is complete?" "Not yet," Japp said, "but Dr. Langston's preliminary examination points to cyanide, taken orally. We're waiting on the coroner's report to confirm the time of death, though Langston estimates it was between midnight and 2 in the morning." "Bon," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. "And the will? You mentioned it yesterday, Hastings. Lady Evelyn inherits the bulk of the estate, with bequests to Miss Lyle and Mr. Ridley. This is most interesting." Poirot requested to meet the guests, and they were summoned to the drawing room. As they assembled, Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small stature somehow commanding the room. He introduced himself with a bow, his voice smooth and deliberate. "Mesdames et messieurs, I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some reputation. I am here to uncover the truth of Sir Reginald's death, which, I assure you, was no accident. I ask for your cooperation, for each of you holds a piece of this puzzle, whether you know it or not." The guests reacted variously. Lady Evelyn's hands trembled as she clutched a handkerchief. Dr. Langston adjusted his spectacles, his face impassive. Miss Winthrop's pen hovered over her notebook, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. Mr. Crane shifted uncomfortably. "Deal with Sir Reginald," though he was vague on details. Miss Lyle stammered that she had seen little of her cousin, being a guest only for the weekend. Major Fowler claimed to have been a friend from Sir Reginald's army days, though his anecdotes were curiously sparse. Mr. Ridley, the solicitor, confirmed the will's contents, but refused to elaborate, citing confidentiality. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his eyes darting from face to face. Hastings, watching closely, knew this was no idle interrogation. Poirot was reading the room, noting the hesitations, the glances, the unconscious gestures that betrayed hidden truths. When the questioning ended, Poirot thanked them politely and dismissed them, but not before requesting that no one leave the manor without his permission. As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "What do you make of them, mon ami? They are a gallery of motives, are they not?" Hastings frowned. "Lady Evelyn stands to gain the most, but she seems genuinely devastated. Crane's too brash to be subtle, but his business dealings sound shaky. And Miss Winthrop, she notices everything, doesn't she?" Poirot smiled. "Précisément. But it is not what they say, Hastings, but what they do not say. The little details, the glance, the pause, the tightening of the hand, these are the threads that will unravel this tapestry. Come, let us examine the study. The voices you heard may hold the key." They moved to Sir Reginald's study, a book-lined room with a heavy desk and a single armchair. Poirot's eyes swept over the space, pausing on a blotter stained with ink, a half-burned letter in the grate, and a small silver cigarette case, oddly out of place on a shelf. "This case," Poirot said, lifting it carefully. "It is engraved with initials. V.C. Victor Crane, perhaps." And yet Sir Reginald did not smoke. "Most curious." As they left the study, the distant sound of a car engine signaled the coroner's arrival. Poirot's expression was serene, but Hastings knew that beneath the calm exterior, Poirot had requested a second round of interviews, this time in the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound volumes and heavy oak furniture. The setting suited his methodical nature, its order and symmetry a mirror to his own mind. One by one, the guests were summoned, each subjected to Poirot's gentle but relentless questioning. Hastings, seated in a corner with a notebook, marveled at his friend's ability to extract information through seemingly innocuous inquiries, each question a probe into the psyche of the suspect. First came Lady Evelyn Ashford, her delicate features drawn with grief. She wore a simple black dress, her auburn hair loosely pinned, as though mourning had robbed her of her usual elegance. Poirot's tone was soft, almost paternal. "Madame, you spoke of your husband's preoccupation in recent weeks. Did he confide in you about this delicate matter he mentioned at dinner?" Lady Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. "No, Monsieur Poirot, he did not. Reginald was private. He said it was a business matter, something to do with his investments. But he was agitated, more so than usual. I hoped, it was nothing serious. And last night after dinner, did you see him again?" Poirot's eyes were fixed on her, noting the slight tremor in her voice. "I went to my room," she said quickly. "I was tired. I heard nothing until the morning." Her voice broke, and she dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. That will be all for now." Next was Dr. Henry Langston, his spectacles glinting in the dim light. He sat stiffly, as though braced for an ordeal. Poirot leaned forward, his voice deceptively mild. "Doctor, you prescribed a sedative for Sir Reginald. Was this a regular occurrence?" Langston adjusted his glasses. "Not regular, no. He complained of sleeplessness about a month ago. I gave him a mild barbiturate, nothing more. Unease, of course. He was watching everyone, but especially Mr. Ridley. And Miss Lyle. She was unusually quiet, even for her. I also saw Mr. Crane slip something into his pocket during dinner. A small envelope, I think. Hastings jotted this down. His interest piqued. Poirot's expression remained serene. An envelope, you say? Fascinating. And your movements after dinner? I was in the library until nearly midnight, reading, she said. I heard footsteps in the hall, but I didn't see who it was. Mr. Victor Crane was next, his brash demeanor subdued but still evident in his swagger. Poirot fixed him with a piercing gaze. Monsieur Crane, you spoke of a business deal with Sir Reginald. Perhaps you can enlighten us? Crane shifted in his seat. It was a private matter. Investments in a shipping venture, nothing to do with this tragedy. And this envelope Mademoiselle Winthrop saw you pocket. Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes were unyielding. Crane's face reddened. Nonsense! She's mistaken. I didn't pocket anything. Poirot let the silence stretch, then nodded. Very well. We shall see. Miss Beatrice Lyle was visibly nervous, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot's voice softened. Mademoiselle, you are a cousin of Lady Evelyn, oui? Did Sir Reginald confide in you about his plans for the weekend? No, she whispered. He barely spoke to me. I was only here because Evelyn insisted. I heard the cry last night, though. It woke me. I thought it was a dream. Poirot leaned forward. A cry, you say? At what time? Just after midnight, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't leave my room. I was afraid Major Ernest Fowler followed, his military bearing intact but his eyes wary. He confirmed his late-night cigar on the terrace, claiming to have seen no one. Poirot asked about his friendship with Sir Reginald, and Fowler's answers were clipped, evasive. We served together years ago, old comrades. Him? Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The heart may grieve, but the mind may plot. We must consider the vial. How did it come to Sir Reginald's hand? And the voices you heard, were they a confrontation or something else? We must also examine this cigarette case of Monsieur Crane's. It does not belong here, and yet it is here. As they spoke, a servant delivered a note from Inspector Japp. A small key had been found in Sir Reginald's desk, its purpose unknown. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A key, Hastings. Perhaps to a safe, a box, or a secret. We shall see. For now, let us watch and listen. The murderer is among us, and they will betray themselves if only we are patient. The day wore on, the manor steeped in suspicion. Poirot's presence had stirred the guests, their masks of civility slipping under his scrutiny. Hastings knew that each question, each glance, was a step closer to the truth. But the path was treacherous, and the shadows of Ravencliff held more secrets yet to be unveiled. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The afternoon at Ravencliff Manor was cloaked in a restless quiet, the kind that follows a storm yet promises another. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, had spent the morning poring over the details of Sir Reginald Ashford's death, his little gray cells humming with possibilities. Captain Hastings, trailing in his wake, felt the weight of the case pressing upon him, the manor's oppressive atmosphere mirrored by the growing suspicion among its inhabitants. Inspector Japp, bustling about with his men, had declared Mr. Victor Crane the prime suspect, a decision that Poirot greeted with a polite but skeptical smile. "Crane, "He's our man," Japp announced in the library, where Poirot and Hastings had gathered to review the evidence. "That cigarette case with his initials found in the study, it's damning. And Miss Winthrop saw him pocket an envelope at dinner. He's got motive, too. Sir Reginald was about to pull out of their business deal, I'd wager. Financial ruin, that's a powerful reason to kill." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. Gleamed. "Précisément, Hastings. The key is a small thing, but in a case such as this, the small things are everything. Let us see where it leads." Leaving Japp to his inquiries, Poirot and Hastings returned to Sir Reginald's study, where the key, a small ornate brass object, awaited examination. The study was as they had left it, the half-burned letter in the grate, the ink-stained blotter, and the silver cigarette case now bagged as evidence by Japp's men. Poirot examined the desk, its drawers, and the shelves, his fingers tracing the edges of a locked mahogany box tucked behind a row of books. The key fit perfectly, and with a soft click, the lid sprang open. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, and a single photograph, yellowed with age. The letters, penned in a feminine hand, were addressed to Sir Reginald and dated some 20 years prior. Poirot read one silently, his expression unreadable. "Mon ami," he said at last. "These are love letters, written by a woman who signs only as E. They speak of a forbidden affair, a promise broken, and a child born in secret." Most intriguing, Hastings peered at the photograph, which showed a young woman with striking features, her auburn hair reminiscent of Lady Evelyn's. Could this be her? Lady Evelyn, I mean, from years ago. Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. The dates do not align. Lady Evelyn was but a child when these were written. But the resemblance is striking, is it not? Perhaps a relative, her mother, perhaps?" The discovery was interrupted by a commotion downstairs. Descending to the great hall, they found Mr. Crane arguing loudly with Inspector Japp, his face flushed with indignation. "This is outrageous," Crane bellowed. "You've no right to accuse me without proof. That cigarette case could have been planted, and I never saw any envelope." Miss Winthrop, observing from a corner, raised an eyebrow, her pen poised over her notebook. Lady Evelyn, pale and trembling, stood nearby, while Miss Lyle hovered at her side, her eyes wide with fear. Major Fowler muttered something about damned impertinence, and Mr. Lyle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's not true. I never asked for anything." Poirot's gaze softened as he regarded her. "Mademoiselle, do not distress yourself. These notes, they are but pieces of the puzzle. We must see how they fit." As Japp continued his inquiries, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The notebook, it is another red herring, I think. It points too conveniently to Monsieur Crane and Mademoiselle Lyle. The true murderer wishes us to look in the wrong direction. But we must consider the letters, the photograph, and the cry you heard, Hastings. They tell a story of the past, one that has led to this present tragedy." That evening, as the guests dined in strained silence, Poirot observed them closely. Lady Evelyn barely touched her food, her eyes red-rimmed. Dr. Langston spoke little, his fingers twitching as he cut his meat. Miss Winthrop's sharp gaze darted from face to face, as though writing a mental chapter. Crane's bravado had returned, but it seemed forced, his laugh too loud. Miss Lyle kept her head down, her hands folded tightly. Major Fowler recounted a tale of a poisoned well in India, a story that felt oddly pointed. Mr. Ridley, ever reserved, excused himself early, citing a headache. After dinner, Poirot and Hastings walked the grounds, the mist now a thin veil under the moonlight. The red herrings. They multiply, Poirot said, his voice low. The cigarette case, the notebook, the envelope. These are distractions. But the letters, they speak of a secret that someone in this house wishes to keep buried. We must tread carefully, Hastings, for the murderer is watching, and they will not hesitate to act again if threatened. Hastings shivered, not from the cold but from the realization that Poirot's words held a chilling truth. The manor, with its secrets and shadows, was a stage for a deadly game, and the next move was yet to be revealed. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning light filtered weakly through the tall windows of Ravencliff Manor, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The air was thick with suspense. Poirot's attention fixed on a single, seemingly trivial detail. A small, crumpled piece of paper, lodged beneath the edge of the bedside rug, overlooked by the police. He retrieved it with a pair of tweezers, unfolding it to reveal a torn fragment of a letter, written in Sir Reginald's precise hand. The words were incomplete, but telling. Must confess before it is too late. E. Betrayal. Child. The ink was fresh, suggesting it had been written shortly before his death. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he slipped the fragment into an envelope, his mind clearly turning over its implications. Hastings, he said, returning to the library. This fragment, it is a clue of the utmost importance. It speaks of a confession, a betrayal, and a child. Echoes of the love letters we found. But why was it torn? And why hidden beneath the rug? Someone, perhaps, did not wish it to be found. Hastings frowned, his pencil pausing over his timeline. Could Sir Reginald have written it that night before he was poisoned? Maybe he was interrupted. Précisément, Poirot replied, tapping his temple. The question is, by whom? And what truth was so dangerous that it led to his death? Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, who carried a new piece of evidence. A chemist's receipt, found in the manor's waste bin, dated 2 weeks prior and listing a purchase of potassium cyanide, ostensibly for pest control. The receipt bore no name, but Japp was quick to point fingers. This clinches it, he declared. Crane's got the means now. He's in shipping, plenty of access to chemicals like that. I'm bringing him in for questioning again. Poirot raised a hand, his expression mild but firm. Patience, mon cher Japp. The receipt, it is suggestive, but it is not proof. Anyone in this house could have obtained cyanide, or even a servant acting on orders. We must not be blinded by the obvious. Japp grumbled, but agreed to delay any formal accusations. Poirot, meanwhile, requested a private audience with Grayson, the butler, the edge of his apron. I saw Miss Lyle pass by the study door around 10:30, sir. She seemed agitated, but I cannot say if she entered. Poirot nodded, dismissing Grayson with thanks. Turning to Hastings, he said, The butler, he is loyal, but he protects someone, I think. Miss Lyle's presence near the study is most curious, especially given her timid nature. We must speak with her again. Miss Beatrice Lyle was summoned to the library, her plain face pale and her hands trembling. Poirot's voice was soothing, almost hypnotic. Mademoiselle, you were seen near the study last night. Did you speak with Sir Reginald? Miss Lyle's eyes widened and she shook her head vigorously. No, Monsieur Poirot. I was only passing by. I couldn't sleep, so I walked the halls. I heard voices, Sir Reginald's and another's, but I didn't go in, I swear it. Whose voice did you hear? Poirot asked, his gaze piercing. I couldn't tell, she stammered. It was low, muffled. I thought it might be a man, but I'm not sure. I went back to my room soon after Poirot let her go, his expression thoughtful. She is frightened, Hastings, but not only of us. She knows more than she says, but fear keeps her silent. We must find what binds her to this secret. As the day progressed, Poirot and Hastings examined the torn letter fragment further, comparing it to the love letters from the locked box. The handwriting matched, confirming Sir Reginald as the author, but the content suggested a recent realization, perhaps tied to the delicate matter he had hinted at during dinner. Poirot also revisited the cigarette case, noting a faint scratch on its surface, as though it had been forcibly opened or dropped. The afternoon brought a new discovery. A maid, tidying the conservatory, found a single pearl earring, its mate missing, tucked beneath a potted fern. The earring was delicate, set with a small diamond and clearly expensive. Poirot, examining it, remarked, "This belongs to a lady of taste, perhaps Lady Evelyn or Miss Winthrop. But why here, in the conservatory?" And Grayson's hesitant testimony were threads in a tapestry only Poirot could yet see. The truth was close, but the manor's shadows held it tightly, and the next revelation would test even Poirot's formidable intellect. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The atmosphere at Ravencliff Manor grew heavier with each passing hour, the weight of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder pressing upon the guests like a storm cloud. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm center in the maelstrom of suspicion, spent the morning in quiet observation, his sharp eyes noting the smallest gestures, a glance too long, a hand too quick to cover a mouth, a pause too pregnant with meaning. Captain Hastings, his faithful companion, felt the strain of the case, his notebook now filled with timelines, alibis, and questions that seemed to multiply faster than answers. By midday, a new development had stirred the manor. Inspector Japp, with his characteristic bluntness, had uncovered a series of financial transactions in Sir Reginald's ledgers, revealing substantial sums paid to Mr. Victor Crane over the past year, followed by an abrupt halt 2 weeks before the murder. "Blackmail, that's what it looks like," Japp declared in the library, where Poirot and Hastings had gathered. "Crane was bleeding him dry, and when Sir Reginald cut him off, he got desperate. Poison's a coward's weapon, and Crane's got coward written all over him." Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair, steepled his fingers. "Blackmail is a possibility, mon cher Japp, but we must not be hasty. The ledgers show payments, oui, but they do not tell us why. And Monsieur Crane, he is too, how do you say, blustering to be subtle. We must look deeper." Hastings, flipping through his notes, pointed out the torn letter fragment found under the rug, with its mention of a confession and a child. Could Crane have known about this secret? Maybe that's what he was holding over Sir Reginald. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A fine theory, Hastings, but incomplete. The letters in the locked box, the photograph, the fragment, they speak of a past betrayal." "Conservatory. Does it belong to you?" Miss Winthrop's lips curved slightly. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I wear no jewelry of that kind. It's too fine for my taste. But I'd wager it's Lady Evelyn's. She has a pair just like it, though she hasn't worn them since the murder." "And your wanderings in the library that night," Poirot continued. "Did you hear the cry that others reported?" She hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "I heard something. A sharp sound, like a gasp or a cry, around midnight. I thought it came from the direction of the study, but I was too far to be certain. I stayed in the library until nearly 1, and I saw no one. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a polite smile. Your observations, they are most helpful, mademoiselle. Next, Poirot turned his attention to Major Ernest Fowler, whose military anecdotes had grown increasingly strained. In the study, Fowler sat rigidly, his weathered face set in a scowl. Major, Poirot said, you and Sir Reginald served together in India, oui? Were there secrets from those days that might have followed him here? Fowler's jaw tightened. We were soldiers, Poirot, not conspirators. Reginald was a good man, but he had his demons. He never spoke of them, and I didn't pry. As for that night, I was on the terrace, smoking as I told you. I heard nothing until the commotion in the morning. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, you glanced at Miss Lyle during dinner, when Sir Reginald spoke of his delicate matter. Why? Fowler flushed. You're imagining things. I was just looking around. Damn it, man, I'm not your murderer. Poirot let the silence linger, then thanked him and moved on. The day's inquiries culminated in a startling revelation from Grayson, the butler, who approached Poirot discreetly as the guests gathered for tea. Sir, Grayson whispered, I didn't wish to speak before, but I found something in the study this morning, hidden behind a book. I thought it best to give it to you. He handed Poirot a small crumpled note. Crane snapped, You're hounding an innocent man. Victor may be brash, but he's no killer. Her outburst drew startled glances, and Crane himself looked surprised, as though her defense was unexpected. Miss Winthrop, ever observant, murmured to Hastings, Lady Evelyn's loyalty to Crane is curious, don't you think? She's protecting someone, but I wonder if it's herself. Mr. Ridley, meanwhile, excused himself abruptly, his briefcase clutched tightly, and Major Fowler's stories grew more disjointed, his eyes darting toward the door. Miss Lyle, pale and silent, spilled her tea, her hands shaking so violently that Dr. Langston offered her a sedative, which she refused. Poirot, watching it all, leaned toward Hastings. The lies, they multiply, mon ami. The note, the earring, the payments to Crane, they are threads in a web of deceit. Someone in this house knows the truth of Sir Reginald's secret, and they killed to keep it buried. We must watch closely, for the next lie may be the one that betrays them. As the day drew to a close, the manor seemed to hold its breath, its shadows deepening with the weight of secrets yet to be uncovered. Poirot's calm exterior belied the storm within his mind, where the little gray cells were weaving a pattern only he could yet discern. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The air at Ravencliff Manor grew taut as a bowstring, each guest navigating the delicate balance between grief and suspicion. The third day since Sir Reginald Ashford's murder dawned with a chill that seeped into the bones, the mist outside mirroring the fog of secrets within. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, sat in the library, his eyes scanning a small notebook where he had jotted his observations. Captain Hastings, at his side, felt the weight of the case pressing harder, the tangled threads of clues, love letters, a torn fragment, a pearl earring, a cryptic note, forming a puzzle that seemed to shift with every revelation. The morning brought a breakthrough, though not of Poirot's making. Inspector Japp, bustling with purpose, summoned Poirot and Hastings to the drawing room. I am not who I seem. My mother was Sir Reginald's sister, but I was born out of wedlock. He took me in as a cousin to protect the family name, but he recently learned of my past indiscretions. I begged him not to cut me out of the will, not for the money, but because it was my only tie to the family. He was angry, but he promised to think it over. "That's all, I swear." The room fell silent, the weight of her confession hanging heavy. Hastings, noting the glances exchanged among the guests, saw Lady Evelyn's face soften with pity, while Mr. Victor Crane's eyes narrowed, as though calculating the implications. Miss Clara Winthrop's pen scratched furiously in her notebook, and Major Fowler cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. Mr. Ridley, clutching his briefcase, looked as though he wished to disappear. Poirot's expression was unreadable, but his voice was kind. "Merci, Mademoiselle Lyle. Your honesty, it is a step toward the truth. You may go." As Miss Lyle fled the room, Japp turned to Poirot, exasperated. "She's got motive, Poirot. If Sir Reginald was going to disinherit her, that's reason enough to slip him cyanide." Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon cher Japp. Mademoiselle Lyle's confession, it is genuine, but it is not the whole story. Her fear is real, but it is not the fear of a murderer. The diary, it was hidden poorly, perhaps too poorly. Someone may wish us to suspect her." Hastings, puzzled, asked, "You think it was planted? But who would do that?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the question. Let us consider the note found by Grayson, the one arranging a midnight meeting. It smells of perfume, a scent I have traced to Lady Evelyn's boudoir. Yet she claims to have been in her room all night. We must test this." Poirot requested a private audience with Lady Evelyn, who entered the library with a fragile dignity. Her black dress brought another revelation. Dr. Henry Langston, summoned by Poirot, admitted to overhearing a heated exchange between Sir Reginald and Mr. Ridley in the study a week prior. "It was about the will," Langston said, his voice low. "Ridley was urging Sir Reginald to make changes. Something about protecting the estate from unworthy heirs. I didn't hear more, but Sir Reginald was furious." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And you did not think to mention this before, Doctor?" Langston flushed. "I thought it private. I didn't want to stir trouble." "Trouble, Doctor, is already here," Poirot said dryly. "Your silence, it protects someone. But whom?" As the day waned, the guests' nerves frayed further. At dinner, Mr. Crane's bravado cracked, his voice rising as he accused Major Fowler of hiding something from their army days. Fowler retorted sharply, his face reddening, and Miss Winthrop watched with a knowing smile, as though collecting material for a novel. Mr. Ridley excused himself early again, his briefcase a constant companion, and Miss Lyle, still shaken, barely spoke. Poirot, observing the chaos, leaned toward Hastings. "The emotional turning point, mon ami. It is here. Miss Lyle's confession has opened the floodgates, and the lies, they unravel. The murderer grows nervous, for the truth draws near. We must be ready, for the next move may be desperate." As night fell, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, each guest a shadow in a game of deception. Poirot's calm exterior belied the intensity of his focus, his mind weaving together the clues: diary, perfume, earring, and letters, into a pattern that promised to reveal the killer's hand. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a shiver of anticipation, knowing that the next revelation would bring them closer to the heart of Ravencliff's deadly mystery. Chapter 9. The Trap. The fourth day at Ravencliff Manor dawned with a brittle clarity, the mist finally yielding to a pale sun that did little to warm the chill of suspicion pervading the estate. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of truth, sensed the moment had come to tighten the net around Sir Reginald Ashford's murderer. The clues, the torn letter fragment, the love letters, the pearl earring, the perfumed note, and Miss Lyle's diary, had woven a complex web, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unravel it. Captain Hastings, his faithful chronicler, felt the tension mounting, knowing that Poirot's next move would be a calculated strike to provoke the guilty. In the late morning, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, its heavy drapes drawn back to let in the weak sunlight. The room, with its gilded mirrors and somber portraits, seemed a fitting stage for what Poirot called a little experiment in psychology. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his arms crossed, skeptical but curious. The guests, seated in a semicircle, wore expressions ranging from weary resignation to barely concealed fear. Lady Evelyn clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed. Dr. Langston adjusted his spectacles nervously. Miss Clara Winthrop's pen hovered over her notebook. Mr. Victor Crane's bravado was tempered by a wary glance. Miss Beatrice Lyle sat hunched, her face pale. Major Fowler's jaw was set, his military bearing strained. And Mr. Thomas Ridley gripped his briefcase as though it were a shield. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. "We are gathered to discuss the tragic death of Sir Reginald Ashford, a man whose secrets have brought us to this moment. The murderer is among us, and the time has come to lay bare the truth. I shall recount the facts, and I invite you to correct me if I err. For the guilty, they will find it difficult to remain silent." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Sir Reginald died of cyanide poisoning, between midnight and 1:30, in a locked room. A mistake. For the little details, they betray. The torn letter fragment, hidden under a rug, speaks of a secret from the past, one tied to the love letters signed E. Who is this E? And why was Sir Reginald preparing to confess? Lady Evelyn's breath caught, and she pressed her handkerchief to her lips. Miss Lyle's hands trembled, and Crane's face flushed with anger. Poirot's eyes swept the room, pausing on each guest. "I propose a theory," he said. "Sir Reginald discovered a truth that threatened someone in this house. A truth about a child, perhaps, born of an affair. This truth led to a confrontation, and to protect it, the murderer acted swiftly, using cyanide to silence him forever." A gasp rippled through the room. Mr. Ridley stood abruptly, his voice shaking. "This is preposterous. I was his solicitor, nothing more. I had no reason to kill him." Poirot raised a hand. "Calm yourself, monsieur. I accuse no one, yet. But let us test the alibis. Madame Ashford, you claim to have been in your room, yet your perfume was on the note. Mademoiselle Lyle, you were seen near the study. Monsieur Crane, your cigarette case was found where it should not be. And Major Fowler, your tales of India grow vague when pressed. Someone is lying." The room crackled with tension. Miss Winthrop's pen scratched furiously, and Dr. Langston cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Monsieur Poirot, I assure you I only prescribed sedatives. I know nothing of cyanide. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But someone here does. I have asked Inspector Japp to search the rooms again, with a particular focus on hidden compartments. And I have requested the chemist's records from the village to trace the cyanide source. The truth, it will not remain hidden. At that moment, a sharp cry broke the silence. Miss Lyle leapt to her feet of the truth. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. Do you believe her, Poirot? About Langston? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Her fear, it is real. But her words, they may be a deflection. The trap, mon ami, is not only for the murderer, but for those who hide partial truths. The conservatory, the vial, the perfume, they point to a pattern, but we must be certain. Tonight, we watch, for the guilty will act. The manor settled into an uneasy quiet, the guests retiring to their rooms under Japp's watchful eye. Poirot, however, remained in the library, his notebook open, his mind racing. Hastings, sensing the climax approaching, felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread. The trap was set, but the murderer was cunning, and Ravencliff's shadows held one final secret, waiting to be exposed. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The drawing room of Ravencliff Manor was a stage set for revelation, its heavy curtains drawn to admit the pale light of a late afternoon sun. The guests, summoned by Hercule Poirot, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of apprehension, defiance, and dread. Captain Hastings, seated near Poirot, felt his heart quicken, knowing that his friend's little gray cells had woven the scattered clues. Love letters, a torn fragment, a pearl earring, a perfumed note, a diary, and a vial, into a tapestry of truth. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his arms crossed, his skepticism tempered by anticipation. The air was thick with the promise of resolution, and Poirot, standing before the fireplace, commanded the room with his quiet authority. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. We have reached the moment of truth in the matter of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder. A man poisoned in a locked room. A cry at midnight. A web of secrets. Langston's face was pale. Miss Clara Winthrop's pen was still. Mr. Crane's jaw tightened. Miss Lyle shrank into her chair. Major Fowler's gaze was steely. Mr. Ridley clutched his briefcase. Poirot continued undeterred. Let us begin with the red herrings. Monsieur Crane's cigarette case found in the study, and the payments in the ledger, they point to blackmail, oui? But they are too convenient, too easily found. The diary of Mademoiselle Lyle, hidden poorly, suggests she feared disinheritance. Yet her confession reveals a deeper truth. She is Sir Reginald's illegitimate niece, a secret he protected. The earring and the perfumed note implicate Madame Ashford, but they too are too obvious. Someone wished to mislead us. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The key lies in the past. The love letters, written 20 years ago, are from a woman named Eleanor, Sir Reginald's lover. Their affair produced a child, a secret he buried to protect his reputation. But recently he learned this child was alive, and he planned to confess, to make amends. This confession threatened someone in this room, a threat so great they killed to silence him. Miss Lyle gasped, her eyes wide. Poirot turned to her. Mademoiselle, you saw Dr. Langston in the conservatory, holding a vial. But you did not see him administer the poison. Your fear led you to accuse, but the truth is more complex. Dr. Langston started to protest, but Poirot raised a hand. Patience, doctor. Let us consider the timeline. Hastings heard voices in the study at 10:30 and a cry at midnight. Mademoiselle Lyle saw you in the conservatory shortly after. But the cyanide, it was not in the vial you held. That vial, I suspect, contained a sedative, one you prepared for Sir Reginald's sleeplessness. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Evelyn. Madam, your perfume on the note, your earring in the Reginald loved, but could not marry. You learned of your parentage, perhaps through the letters, and confronted him. He arranged the midnight meeting to discuss it, but you saw your chance. You slipped cyanide into his tea, using a vial from the chemist, purchased under the guise of pest control. You planted the earring, the note, the diary, all to mislead. The cry we heard was Sir Reginald's, as the poison took hold. Ridley leapt to his feet, his voice shrill. You have no proof! Poirot's eyes gleamed. The proof, it is in the details. The chemist's receipt, traced to you through a false name. The scratches on the windowsill, where you climbed out after locking the door from inside. The torn letter fragment, which you tried to destroy but could not fully conceal. And your briefcase, monsieur. It contains the original will, which you planned to replace with a forged version, cutting out Mademoiselle Lyle and securing your inheritance. Japp stepped forward, his face grim. That's enough, Ridley. We'll search that briefcase. Ridley's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. He was going to ruin me, he whispered. I had built a life, a name. I couldn't let him take it away. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Lady Evelyn sobbed, Miss Lyle covered her face, and Crane muttered an oath. Poirot raised a hand for silence. The tragedy of Ravencliff is one of secrets kept too long. Monsieur Ridley, your crime was not only against Sir Reginald, but against the truth you sought to bury. As Japp led Ridley away, the guests dispersed, their faces etched with shock and relief. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression somber. The little grey cells, they have done their work, mon ami. But the cost of truth, it is always heavy. The manor fell silent, its shadows lighter now, but the echoes of its secrets lingered, a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice by Hercule Poirot. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The aftermath. Ridley's confession. It was like watching a curtain pulled back on a stage. But how did you know it was him? The clues pointed everywhere. Poirot set down his cup, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Mon ami, the clues, they always point everywhere until the mind imposes order. The little grey cells, they see not only the clues, but the spaces between them, the contradictions, the hesitations, the things unsaid. Ridley's crime was one of desperation, but also of calculation. He believed he could outwit us all, but he underestimated the power of observation. Hastings leaned forward, curious. "The briefcase, though. How did you know it held the forged will?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. The briefcase. It was his shield, always clutched tightly, even when there was no need. A solicitor carries papers, but Ridley's grip was that of a man protecting his life. The love letters, the torn fragment, the codicil, they all pointed to a secret tied to his own identity. When I learned of the payments to Crane, I suspected a misdirection. But Ridley's evasiveness, his refusal to discuss the will's details, it betrayed him. The final proof was the chemist's receipt, traced to a false name he used, a name I confirmed with the village chemist this morning. Hastings shook his head in admiration. And the earring, the perfumed note, those were his attempts to frame Lady Evelyn? Précisément, Poirot said. Ridley knew the household well, having served as Sir Reginald's solicitor for years. He had access to Madame Ashford's boudoir, her perfume, her jewelry. He placed the earring in the conservatory, knowing it would be found, and used her perfume on the note to suggest a secret meeting. But these clues, they were too perfect, too convenient. The true murderer hides in the shadows, not in the spotlight. Hastings frowned, his mind drifting to the other guests. What about Miss Lyle? Her diary, her confession, it seems so damning. Poirot nodded. Mademoiselle Lyle was a pawn, her fear exploited to cast suspicion. Her diary, left with planning to confess, it's tragic. Poirot's expression grew somber. Oui, mon ami. The tragedy of Ravencliff is one of secrets buried too long. Sir Reginald sought to right a wrong, to acknowledge his son, but that act of redemption cost him his life. The human heart, it is complex, capable of love, of shame, of murder. This is why I, Hercule Poirot, rely not on the heart, but on the mind. For only the mind can see through the fog of emotion. The library door opened, and Inspector Japp entered, his face weary but satisfied. "Ridley's been taken to the station," he said. "He's confessed to everything, how he slipped the cyanide into Sir Reginald's tea during their midnight meeting, how he climbed out the window to leave the room locked. We found the forged will in his briefcase, just as you said, Poirot. You've outdone yourself this time." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Japp. But the credit belongs to the truth, which always reveals itself to those who seek it." As Japp left to finalize his reports, Poirot rose, adjusting his tie with meticulous care. "Come, Hastings. The air of Ravencliff grows stale. Let us return to London, where the world is less shadowed by secrets." They stepped into the great hall, where Lady Evelyn stood, her face pale but composed. She approached Poirot, her voice soft. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you. I never suspected Thomas. He was always so quiet, so loyal. I feel as though I've lost Reginald twice." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the pain of truth is sharp, but it heals in time. Live well, for that is the best tribute to your husband's memory." As they boarded the taxi to the station, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its towers looming against the gray sky. "Do you ever tire of it, Poirot? Unraveling these tragedies, seeing the worst of human nature." Poirot's eyes softened. "Sometimes, mon ami, I feel the weight. But to bring order from chaos, to shine light into darkness, this is my purpose." The little gray cells, they do not rest. The case, it is resolved, but there is a shadow that remains. Ridley's confession was complete, yet something nags at me. A motive within a motive, perhaps, that we have not fully grasped. Hastings frowned, his notebook open on his lap. But Ridley admitted everything. His parentage, the fear of exposure, the forged will. What more could there be? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The human heart, mon ami, is a labyrinth. Ridley killed to protect his secret, but was that all? The love letters, the codicil, the payments to Crane, they suggest a deeper game, one that may involve another player. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Grayson, the butler, his face etched with worry. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, bowing slightly, "I beg your pardon, but I've found something you should see. It was in the conservatory, hidden in a planter, after your gathering yesterday." He handed Poirot a small sealed envelope, its edges worn but intact. The faint scent of Lady Evelyn's floral perfume clung to it, and it bore a single initial, E. Poirot's fingers traced the seal, his expression sharpening. "Merci, Grayson. This is most illuminating. Where exactly was it found?" "Beneath the fern where the earring was discovered, sir," Grayson replied. "I only noticed it when tidying this morning." Poirot dismissed the butler and carefully opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was Sir Reginald's, and the note was dated the day of his death. E. If I do not survive this night, know that I intended to make amends. The truth must be told for the child's sake. Forgive me. R. Hastings leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Another note, and it's addressed to E again. But if Ridley was the child, why this note? And why hidden in the conservatory? Poirot's eyes narrowed. This note, it was not meant for Ridley. It suggests another E, someone Sir Reginald wished to protect or warn. The conservatory. It is a place of secrets, a crossroads between the study and the West Wing. We must speak with Lady Evelyn once more. They found Lady Evelyn in the drawer. Letters. Lady Evelyn's voice broke. "I don't know. I assumed it was Thomas, Mr. Ridley. But this note, it suggests there's more. Perhaps another child, or another secret. Reginald was so troubled in his last weeks, always locking himself in his study. I thought it was business, but now..." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Madame, your honesty is invaluable. One final question. Did you ever suspect Ridley?" She shook her head. "Never. He was so quiet, so loyal. But I saw him arguing with Reginald once about the will. I thought it was just legal matters. I was wrong." As they left Lady Evelyn, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The note. It confirms Ridley's motive, but it also hints at a broader truth. Sir Reginald intended to reveal not only Ridley's parentage, but perhaps another secret tied to Eleanor. We must examine the love letters again." They returned to the study where the locked box containing the letters remained. Poirot reread them carefully, pausing at a passage in one. "Our child, she must never know the shame of our love." The pronoun she stood out, a detail overlooked in the rush of Ridley's confession. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "the child was a daughter, not a son. Ridley was not the only secret. There is another, perhaps still among us." Hastings's eyes widened. "Miss Lyle. She's Sir Reginald's niece, but could she be?" "No," Poirot said. "Her parentage is clear. But Miss Clara Winthrop..." She is observant, detached, and her past is vague. Her arrival here, invited by Sir Reginald, was no coincidence. We must question her. They found Miss Winthrop in the library, her notebook open, her pen moving swiftly. She looked up, her green eyes sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, have you come to accuse me next?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Mademoiselle, you are a writer of mysteries, but perhaps you are also part of expose you both." Threatening his inheritance and his carefully hidden identity, he killed to silence the truth. As the rain ceased and the taxi arrived, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave. The manor's secrets, though laid bare, left a lingering sorrow. Poirot, gazing at the towering chimneys, murmured, "The truth, it frees, but it also wounds." For Mademoiselle Winthrop, the knowledge of her parentage is both a gift and a burden. Hastings, climbing into the taxi, felt the weight of the case lift. But the unseen motive, the hidden daughter, added a final layer to Ravencliff's tragedy, a reminder of the enduring power of secrets. Chapter 13. The Hidden Truth. The rain had ceased, leaving Ravencliff Manor glistening under a weak sun, its stone facade a silent witness to the unraveling of its secrets. Hercule Poirot, preparing to depart with Captain Hastings, lingered in the great hall, his sharp eyes scanning the portraits of Ashford's past, as if they might whisper one final clue. The revelation of Miss Clara Winthrop as Sir Reginald's secret daughter had added a poignant layer to the tragedy. Yet Poirot's demeanor suggested his little gray cells were not yet at rest. Hastings, packing his notebook and the weight of the case, sensed his friend's unease. "Poirot," he ventured, "you've solved the murder. Ridley's confessed, and Miss Winthrop's secret is out. What's troubling you now?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his mustache twitching. "Mon ami, the puzzle is nearly complete, but there is a piece missing, a detail that does not fit. Ridley's motive, it was to protect his identity, but the ferocity of his act, the precision of his misdirection, it speaks of a deeper fear, perhaps a fear shared. We must ensure no shadow remains." Their departure was delayed by the arrival of Inspector Japp, who bustled into the hall with a new discovery. "Poirot, you'll want to see this," he said, holding a small locked diary found in Ridley's briefcase during a final search. "Eleanor is alive, and Ridley, her son, knew of Sir Reginald's plan to reunite with Clara. His fear was not only for his inheritance, but for his mother's shame, should the affair be exposed." Poirot requested an immediate meeting with Miss Winthrop, who was found in the library, her notebook closed, her face a mask of quiet resignation. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm. "Your mother, Eleanor. She lives, does she not? And you have known this, perhaps, longer than you admitted." Miss Winthrop's eyes flickered, but she nodded slowly. "I learned last year, through a letter she sent me. She begged me not to seek her out, to protect her privacy. I respected her wish, but when Sir Reginald invited me here, I hoped to understand my past. I didn't know Thomas was my brother until you revealed it." Poirot held up the diary. "This confirms your mother's fear. Thomas Ridley, your half-brother, killed to protect her secret, and his own. Did you suspect him?" She shook her head, tears welling. "No. He was so quiet, so unassuming.
I thought he was just a solicitor. But now, I see the pain he carried. The fear of our family's shame. Poirot turned to Japp. Inspector, you must locate Eleanor Ridley. She may hold the final piece of this tragedy, confirmation of Ridley's motives. Japp nodded, dispatching a telegram to London to trace Eleanor's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Poirot and Hastings visited Lady Evelyn, who was packing to leave Ravencliff. Her face, still pale, softened at their approach. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I owe you so much. But I feel lost. Reginald's secrets have torn this house apart." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the truth. It is painful, but it cleanses. You are not the E of the letters, but you loved a man burdened by his past. Live free of that burden now." As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused at the conservatory, where the earring and the hidden note had been found.
Returned to Ravencliff Manor, a soft patter against the windows that seemed to mourn the secrets laid bare. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings, their departure delayed by the discovery of Eleanor Ridley's diary, lingered in the great hall, awaiting word from Inspector Japp's inquiries into Eleanor's whereabouts. The manor, though quieter now with Thomas Ridley in custody, still held an air of unease, as if its walls retained the echoes of past betrayals. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, paced slowly, his eyes distant but alert. Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler, sensed that his friend was not yet ready to close the book on this case. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence, "you've solved the murder, uncovered Ridley's motive, and revealed Miss Winthrop's parentage. Surely there's nothing left to unearth." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, the surface of a mystery may be resolved, but the depths, they hold echoes that resonate. Eleanor Ridley, the mother of both Thomas and Clara, is the final piece. Her silence, it protected her children, but it also enabled a tragedy. We must hear her voice to understand the full measure of this crime." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a telegram from Japp, delivered by Grayson, the butler, whose stooped figure seemed wearier than ever. The message was brief but electrifying. "Eleanor Ridley located in Brighton. Right. Living under maiden name, Eleanor Marlowe. We'll bring her to Ravencliff tomorrow. Right." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Bon. The final thread, it approaches. Madame Marlowe. She will confirm the motives, and perhaps reveal why Thomas acted with such desperation." The day passed in a subdued hush, the guests keeping to themselves. Lady Evelyn, preparing to leave for London, seemed a shadow of her former self, her auburn hair tucked beneath a mourning veil. Miss Clara Winthrop remained in the library, her notebook untouched, her gaze fixed on some inner horizon. Diary in the conservatory? Why not destroy it? Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Because, mon ami, Thomas Ridley was torn. He wished to protect his mother's honor, but he could not bring himself to destroy her words. The conservatory, it was a compromise, a place to hide it, yet not discard it. His mistake was in underestimating the thoroughness of Grayson's cleaning. That evening, as the guests gathered for a final, strained dinner, Poirot's presence cast a quiet authority over the table. He spoke little, his eyes moving from face to face, noting the subtle shifts in demeanor. Lady Evelyn's hands trembled as she sipped her wine, and Miss Winthrop's sharp gaze softened when it fell on Poirot, as if she sensed the weight of her mother's impending arrival. After dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside in the great hall. "Tomorrow, mon ami, we meet Eleanor Marlowe. She will confirm the truth of the letters and the diary. But more importantly, she will reveal the emotional currents that drove Thomas to murder. The past, it is a heavy burden, and it has claimed many victims in this house." Hastings, looking at the portraits lining the hall, felt a pang of sympathy for the players in this tragedy. "It's a sad business, Poirot. Clara, learning she has a mother and a brother, only to lose them to scandal and crime. And Lady Evelyn, widowed by a man who kept so much hidden." Poirot nodded, his expression somber. "The human heart. It is both fragile and fierce. Sir Reginald sought redemption, but his silence bred mistrust. Thomas sought to protect his mother, but his fear led to murder. And Clara, she carries the weight of a truth she never sought. This is why, Hastings, I pursue the truth, not for its own sake, but to free those bound by it." As night fell, the manor seemed to settle, its shadows softer now, as if relieved of their burden. Poirot retired to his room, his mind already preparing for Eleanor's arrival. Hastings, gazing out at the rain-soaked grounds, felt a quiet awe for his friend's relentless pursuit of clarity. The echoes of Née Ridley was in her late 50s, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her face etched with lines of sorrow and resilience. Her eyes, strikingly similar to Miss Clara Winthrop's, held a quiet strength, but they darted nervously as she surveyed the gathered guests. Lady Evelyn, pale and composed. Miss Winthrop, her notebook clutched tightly. Dr. Henry Langston, subdued. Mr. Victor Crane, restless. Miss Beatrice Lyle, withdrawn. And Major Ernest Fowler, standing stiffly by the window. Poirot stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Madame Marlowe, I am Hercule Poirot. Your presence here, it is the final piece in a puzzle of great tragedy. Will you speak the truth, for the sake of your children and the memory of Sir Reginald?" Eleanor's voice was soft but steady. "I came because I must. I've hidden too long, and my silence has cost too much." She glanced at Miss Winthrop, her eyes softening. "Clara, my daughter, I never meant for you to learn this way. I gave you up to protect you from scandal, but I never stopped loving you." Miss Winthrop's composure faltered, tears welling as she stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell me? I thought you were dead." Eleanor's hands trembled. "I wanted you to have a life free of my shame. Reginald and I, we loved fiercely, but it was forbidden. When I bore you, he arranged for your adoption, and I retreated to Brighton, living under my maiden name. Thomas, my son, knew only part of the truth. His own parentage, but not yours until recently." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And Thomas, madame, when he learned of Clara, what did he do?" Eleanor's voice broke. "He was furious. He found the letters last year in Reginald's study and confronted me. I begged him to let it be. But when Reginald wrote to me, saying he planned to reveal everything, to acknowledge both Thomas and Clara's father, using cyanide obtained under a false name, he planted the earring, the perfumed note, the diary, to mislead us, But the diary of Madame Marlowe, hidden in the conservatory, betrayed him, as did the scratches on the window sill, where he escaped after locking the room. Miss Winthrop stepped closer to her mother, her voice steady despite her tears. "And me, Monsieur Poirot? What place do I have in this?" Poirot's eyes softened. "Mademoiselle, you are the daughter Sir Reginald wished to honor. Your presence here, it was his final act of love. Live with that truth, and let it guide you." The room fell silent, the weight of Eleanor's words settling over the guests. Jap, clearing his throat, addressed Poirot. "You've done it again, Poirot. The case is airtight. Ridley's confessed, and Eleanor's testimony seals it. I'll take her statement and ensure she's treated kindly." As the guests dispersed, Eleanor and Miss Winthrop remained, speaking softly, their reunion a fragile bridge over years of separation. Lady Evelyn approached Poirot, her face etched with gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given me clarity, though it hurts. I'll sell Ravencliff. It holds too many ghosts." Poirot bowed. "Madame, the ghosts, they fade with time. Live for the future, not the past." As Poirot and Hastings boarded their taxi, the manor receded into the distance, its towers swallowed by the mist. Hastings, gazing back, murmured, "A sad end, Poirot. A family torn apart by secrets. A mother and daughter reunited too late." Poirot's voice was quiet but firm. "The truth, mon ami. It is both sword and salve. It wounds, but it heals. For Clara and Eleanor, it is a beginning. For us, it is another chapter closed, until the next mystery calls." The taxi rolled toward London, leaving Ravencliff's echoes behind, a testament to Poirot's unyielding pursuit of truth and the enduring complexity of the human heart.